Hey everyone, welcome to Virtus Vision. Today I am welcoming April Adams. She is a personal coach who works with people's emotional triggers. Welcome, April.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
Yes, I'm very excited. And also I wanted to mention that you do talk about working with empaths. And that resonated with me in particular because I am one. And I think that probably people who are in our field are quite empathic. And in fact, when I started working with clients, that was one thing I really had to use some of my own techniques on was being empathic and not sort of taking on other people's emotions.
And I have found it to be such an interesting journey along the way. First, really learning that it was me tuning into other people. Because I think, we all assume as empaths, it's the world putting their stuff on us or this other person putting their stuff on us and trying to drain us. But it's actually us unconsciously tuning into them and going like, how's this person feeling? Is it safe to be around this person? Can I behave normally around this person? And we don't consciously know that. So we pick up what we're feeling from other people and then we take it on like it's ours and walk around all day with it. Where, somebody who's clairvoyant wouldn't walk around all day feeling other people's stuff. They'd get a vision about what's going on with this person. They'd know it was about this person. They would deal with it and walk away. Where as empaths, we mistakenly take it on as ours. And it's us tuning into it in the first place. So
And yeah, absolutely. And I don't think we do our best work if we are taking on other people's. I mean, you can definitely be compassionate, but being empathetic or sympathetic, it's not in the client's best interest, and it's not in our best interest either.
right. Yeah. I mean, we all come in with our own chosen journey of what we want to learn and what we want to experience in this life. And if someone else, an empath, is taking some of that pain for you and trying to heal it in themselves, the empath is harming themselves. But also, the person who chose to have that journey is having some of their journey taken away from them and some of the chosen experience that they came to have. So, just leaving people to their own devices is a
Right.
much healthier way for everyone involved, even though it's so hard when you're empathic to feel other people suffering. And I think that's why empaths are like, oh, I could take that into me and heal it. And then they make themselves sick with it. And, it just becomes this whole spiral thing. Something that I've noticed, and I don't know if you've noticed this too, the more of my own work that I've done on a subconscious level, the less I pick up on other people's stuff.
It's true. Like I said, when I first started, it was fast and furious, and I really had to dig in with my own technique in stopping it. But now, yeah, I absolutely don't take it on. And I like what you said about everyone's on their own journey. I really feel that now. People are learning their own lesson, and I'm a guide, but that's it.
Exactly. Yeah, we can give them the tools to heal themselves, but we can't fix it for them. So
That's right. Well, you work with triggers, so I want to get into that first. How does, well, let's speak to people as if we don't. Let's talk about it so they really understand. How would someone recognize what a trigger is for them?
well, basically, anytime you get upset about anything, it's really anytime we have a strong emotional reaction to anything across the board, whether it is something as intense as a car accident or being physically abused or something like that, or if it's just somebody saying something rude on social media, whether even directly toward us or about something completely unrelated to us. And then we get these reactions to those things, and those are triggers. They can be small triggers, they can be big triggers, but a lot of times we're reacting to things way out of proportion to what the situation actually warrants. And it's just because our subconscious sees some form of threat in that thing. So if, we can convince the subconscious that it's safe, you can just move on from that threat and not have to talk yourself down every time you come in contact with that kind of thing.
Because trigger has become such a buzzword now. So how do you define trigger versus trauma? Or do you separate the definitions?
To me, trigger is just the emotional response that you have to something. So, I mean, or being triggered is the emotional response you have to something. But a trigger is just something that reminds your subconscious of something bad that's happened to you before. So that's really what's going on, is like a trigger is a replay. It's like basically your subconscious going, this is a little too similar to something bad that's happened to us in the past, so we should probably freak out so that we can avoid this thing and make it go away. So then we get super emotional about whatever it is and have our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response to, whatever the particular trigger of the moment is, based on our past experiences.
Yeah, and the subconscious mind, it's important to remember, is there to keep us safe. That's it. It wants to keep us safe. So if it recognizes something, if it's made an association, it will work to keep you phobic, or it work to bring up a response to keep you safe, keep you away from that thing. So in terms of trauma, there's also misconception around the definition of trauma, I think. I think a lot of people assume that it had to be one big event or events that you kick back to, but it can actually be repetition of something. How do you define trauma to your clients when they're curious what it is?
It's an interesting process because people will come in, I mean, certainly at least half of my clients come in knowing, like, yes, I've had a trauma, or I had several traumas, and they're very clear on that. But a lot of people will come in going, I had a great childhood. I don't understand why I have these emotional responses to things and all of that. It just doesn't make sense to me. And we have to talk to some degree about the things that happen over and over again, just the theme of having your feelings dismissed throughout your life. Like, that is trauma, even though it's not, nobody's beating you up, nobody's screaming in your face. But if every time you have a feeling and you express it, you get told you're too sensitive or settle down or whatever, that builds up over time and creates this whole pattern of stuffing down your feelings, or or going the other direction and really going overboard with expressing your feelings, instead of being able to have a balanced respect for your own feelings. So trauma doesn't have to be this massive thing that happens to you all at once. And it doesn't even have to be something violent or anything. It can completely just be those random stupid things that happen on a Tuesday afternoon that just add up over time if they happen over and over and over again, and they hurt your feelings over and over and over again, or it creates this negative pattern. It's like death by 1,000 razor cuts. So
yeah, and it's like you said before, it makes you feel unsafe on some level. Really, that's what everything comes down to, is if you have felt in any way unsafe, it can be, then there creates the emotional trigger that reminds us that this is something to stay away from. So when the client comes to you, what techniques do you use for trauma or triggers?
my favorite tool, hands down, is called PS Tech, and it stands for percussive suggestion technique. But basically, it's just a combination of every different brain retraining modality that's ever been proven effective into one method. So it takes the brilliance of hypnosis and EMDR and NLP and pattern interrupt and just this Pavlovian retraining of your brain. And there's also some accidental EFT in it. It wasn't intended to be part of it, but because you're tapping a little bit, there's some meridian points in your fingertips that are getting stimulated. So a lot of people respond to it like energy work as well. So it just takes all of those things. And each of those tools is effective on its own if you continue to go back for more until it completely works its way out of your brain. But when you bring them all together, they fill in each other's blanks. And so instead of having to do it over and over and over again, or going to somebody to have to do it, it's something you can use on your own at home as desired. And a lot of times, something that might take 6 to 10 sessions with a therapist to remedy could possibly even take 30 to 60 minutes to remedy on your own. So you can approach like way more topics and way more triggers for yourself than you would be able to, if you always had to go to somebody else to deal with it. But what's really fabulous about these tools is they're free. So you can download them, you can play with them on your own. And the the amazing part for me is just how fast it is, how permanent it is. And it's really about kind of getting things at their root. And I think that's really the part I play in it, because you can go and use these tools on whatever is bothering you right now, and it'll help you feel better about whatever's bothering you right now. But what I've discovered is you can actually use it to remove traumas from the past that are related to whatever's bothering you right now. And then it won't bother you at all the next time you encounter something similar. So that's where the real trick is going, okay, so something's bothering me right now. What is really bothering me about that? And when have I experienced something similar in the past? And then using the track while you acknowledge all of the times something like that has happened, so that you can clear the whole thing and be able to move on from it and not have to talk yourself down the next time you encounter something, and just being able to feel safe the next time you encounter something that's similar to the trigger at hand.
There's a lot you said that I like. A lot. I'm all about time management, so I like that it encompasses everything. EFT, I use some EFT with certain protocols for, say, smoking cessation. I use some of it. It's the tapping helped to clear the nervous system. But I think it's also important to be able to work directly with the subconscious mind as well. So when you can hit different modalities all in one, I like that. I like things to be finite. I don't like them to be drawn out. And it's not necessary for them to be drawn out. So that's one thing that I love about this, that you said it's succinct and it's powerful. And I also, just to tap EMDR, if you just want to explain maybe what that is, so the viewer can know what that is. EMDR versus the percussive suggestion technique that you do.
Right, right, absolutely. Yeah. So EMDR is therapy that was developed in the 80s based on REM sleep. And so, it used to be, well, I mean, the whole reason that our eyes move so much when we're sleeping, our brain is reprocessing the difficult things that have happened recently in our lives. And it's trying to figure out, okay, do I keep this? Do I throw this away? Where am I going to store this? How are we going to perceive this? And, if it's minor enough, you just be able to move on from it. And so they discovered that if you had people move their eyes in a certain pattern while they thought about a traumatic event, eventually it would remove it from the amygdala, so you wouldn't have a fight or flight response to that anymore and have the flashbacks about it and all that. Eventually they realized you didn't even have to do the eye movement to get the same effect, because what the eye movement was doing was creating stimulation of both sides of your brain and creating kind of a whole brain state to reprocess that situation. So now a lot of therapists will use bilateral stimulation of the body, and they'll either like pull up a chair and do this to your knees, or they'll put these little buzzy things in your hand that go back and forth. So any kind of conscious bilateral stimulation of your body creates that same bilateral stimulation of the brain. So you're in that whole brain state, reprocessing the difficult thing that's going on. And with the PS Tech track, there's hypnotic suggestion, but there's also these sounds that you're tapping your hands to. So there's like one sound for your right hand, one sound for your left, and one sound for both. So you're kind of tapping to whatever sound you're hearing at the time that it's coming up. And that's creating that bilateral stimulation, as well as a form of distraction hypnosis, so that it's not required for people to be able to be surrendered and relaxed and sleepy because, some people refuse. So
Yeah.
this kind of, as long as you do the process, as long as you do that tapping, you're getting that distraction piece so that the words on the track can access the subconscious mind. So, the EMDR effect that is, similar to EMDR treatment is also creating a whole other effect within this track at the same time. So it's kind of, using distraction hypnosis and EMDR on top of each other with the same process of trying to tap to those sounds.
So, as hypnotherapists, I know we know the power of working directly with the subconscious, but I do think that if you're not bringing in the hypnotic suggestion and the hypnosis piece of it, it can be a feel-good thing for a while, but I think inevitably you sort of, the problem rears up again if you're not. So how important do you think it is to get to the initial sensitizing event when you're working with clients?
Everything. Absolutely everything. And that's the strange part about the whole process, is sometimes you don't consciously know what that original sensitizing event is. Because as we were talking about, sometimes it's a million little things.
Yeah.
And so then you have to acknowledge, like, just the fact that it's been going on since you were born or since you were 3 or whatever, and, giving all these examples. But it can also be something that happened in utero. It can be something that happened to an ancestor. It can be something from a past life. It can be something from the first 3 years of your life that you don't have a clear memory of, or something you've blocked out, or something that you are dismissing as, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal. So all of these different things can kind of sneak up on you as a root of where something originated. So that's another part, I think, where we come in, is helping people figure that out, because that's the place where I'll use more traditional hypnosis. I'll do regression work or something to bring somebody back and have their brain show them, because your subconscious knows exactly where that thing originated. So we just have to ask it. So, so just go back, kind of heal it there, do a little bit of inner child work or something in there, but also bring it back and be able to then apply it to the track as well when you're working on the trigger. Now being able to acknowledge that original root that maybe you weren't consciously aware of before is super beneficial. But something you mentioned too, with the EMDR aspect of, like, sometimes things coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's kind of my issue with EMDR. I am so glad that EMDR exists and that it has helped so many people. But a lot of therapists don't use hypnotic suggestion while they're doing EMDR. So the brain isn't given any instruction as to how to perceive that thing or where to store it or what to do with it. So your brain is left to its own devices, and our brains aren't really qualified for that. Our brains make all kinds of poor choices in the name of protecting us. So just leaving the brain to its own devices to reprocess something isn't always effective. So giving it clear instruction about what it's going to do with that tends to be much more effective. And I think that's why I like this method so much, is that you are getting that done in a very specific way, so that from here on out you feel safe around whatever that thing is that's coming up.
You're sort of getting at it from every angle.
Right.
Yeah. So how do you find direct suggestion versus a regression session? Do you think that one can work over the other? I'm asking for the viewer's sake. I know which I prefer and what I like to do, but what's your experience of both?
Yeah, so I personally have found the PS Tech tools so effective that I don't need to do any direct suggestion hypnosis anymore, because the tracks just do that for us, very specifically directed to whatever the client is thinking of. So I don't typically do that. I personally, myself in my own practice, I don't do smoking cessation or weight loss or, any of those kinds of work with people, because to me, I want to work more with what are your emotional triggers? What are the patterns in your life that are leading you to these escapism behaviors, and heal those. And then it makes whatever diet you choose or whatever program you use to stop doing the addictive behavior work that much better, because now you don't need to escape the emotions anymore because you've healed those. Um, so I like hypnosis as a discovery tool myself. Like if I personally do any kind of hypnosis with people, I'll either do regression work to find roots, to find things in your history that need to be healed. Or I'll do guided meditations that are a little bit hypnosis-y, that walk people through ways to heal themselves,
Yeah.
visualizing healing themselves. But yeah, I don't typically do a lot of, you will do this thing from now on. You know, you no longer do this kind of thing, because I feel that it's always important to deal with the roots of the behavior first.
Yes. And it sounds like you like to empower the client as well to sort of be able to take this away and do it on their own. I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about not everyone, clients are all different. We have different personalities, and some people are a little resistant going in. So, that's for many reasons. They might have a very logical brain. They might be hyper analytical. They may be a lot of thoughts that they're having trouble arresting, or maybe they have a personality that's a little controlling. And how do you approach those people who say, I can't be hypnotized? We'll say that.
Yeah.
How do you approach those clients?
And that's why the track is so helpful for those people, especially because they don't have to surrender. They don't have to relax. They don't have to go into any kind of deep, zoned out state at all. They are completely able to stay awake, aware, alert. They're able to hear everything that's being said to them. There's no subliminal messaging. So they completely get to drive the car.
Yeah.
They're not handing anything over to anyone else. So, it's much easier for, my type A personalities to be able to do this work, because they don't have to get into what you would traditionally call hypnosis or the hypnotic state in order to get the benefits of this. Because as long as you take part in the distraction technique in distraction hypnosis, it works on everybody. It's just that most people have that misconception that you have to be in like this zoned out state in order
Right.
to be hypnotized.
Yeah, it's always about managing the perceptions and expectation, really, and being really clear on what hypnosis is. What would be your definition of hypnosis if you were to explain it to someone who had never experienced it?
Yeah, to me, it's just being able to create change on the subconscious level. So, just being able to teach the subconscious something new and change its perspective on something. And, there's a million different ways you can go about doing that. But to me, that's the essence of hypnosis, is just, getting around the conscious mind so that you can have the conversation with the subconscious and either get information from it or create change on that level. But it's really just about being able to, access the subconscious and usually create change on that level.
It's really that simple. That's well said, and it's really that simple. Now, you mentioned earlier about fight, flight, freeze response, and I wanted to sort of expound upon that because I think so many people in their everyday lives, we know how easy it is just to get into a fight or flight response. In fact, people in their daily lives are sort of in and out of it all the time. And, special forces who have been trained in combat, they are able to have a lower, resting heart rate in the middle of chaos than many people in their everyday lives. So, interestingly. So do you want to talk a bit about fight, flight, freeze?
Sure. Yeah. And I'm also fascinated by the fact that they're adding more trauma responses as well. So apparently fawning has been added to the list as well, which is to me the most interesting and probably the most common trauma response. So fight, flight, freeze are just ways to react in the moment. So the tendency to want to fight back or argue or get really confrontational about something if you're confronted with a strong emotion or a trigger. And freeze is just you freeze up and you just don't know what to do. And so you just kind of stand there and be quiet or, kind of just go within your shell a little bit. And flight is just constantly running away. And, you may either do that in the moment or you may find it to be a pattern, just like as soon as a relationship gets hard, as soon as a job gets hard, off you go. So you can try to run away in the moment that something bad is happening. Oh, I'm going to go in the other room. There's too much drama here. Or, you end up with these patterns. But fawning, this is just so amazing. When you have some kind of authority figure growing up that you have to please all the time, we get into these people pleasing tendencies. And so even when we're encountered with somebody that we can't stand, we tend to react with this, oh yeah, yes sir, let me please you, let me make, what can I do to avoid you being upset? How can I please you? How can I fix it? How can I make it better? And so we go into that mode, like even if it's somebody we really don't want to be interacting with in that way, we automatically kind of go into that as kind of a problem solving method. So it's amazing the different ways that our brain will respond, like in the moment when we're encountering something like that.
All of these coping strategies. And you talked about the in fight, flight, or freeze, we talked about that you had talked about your genealogy basically can have a large impact on how maybe your triggers. Now, that is your ancestral primal brain, the fight or flight or freeze or fawning even. It's really, these are survival mechanisms that go back so that don't even apply to these everyday situations now, but we react as if our lives depend on it. And then there's the whole chemical implication with, the cortisol and everything. So it really can have health effects.
We respond to somebody saying something rude on social media like there's actually a predator chasing us around. So, it's incredible, like the flush of chemicals that goes through our body when we're encountered with a perceived threat that isn't actually threatening at all and won't even affect us, in an hour, much less be a threat to our entire lives and our survival. So it's astonishing. And I think it's just our brains haven't evolved to the level of safety and security that we're currently living in. And I mean, part of the issue is that there are people in the world who are still living like in survival mode, literally, and having to deal with survival level issues all the time. And so, you've got that, but then you've got societies where by and large you're safe and it's peaceful, and we're still reacting to these little piddly things as though there are these massive life threats happening to us moment to moment. And regardless of whether you've experienced big, massive trauma or you react big to little stupid traumas, you can actually just remove that so that you can move on and be at peace and not have to be constantly hyper vigilant for what's going to get me next, or being able to just not be triggered the next time you encounter something that used to bother you every time.
That absolutely. And I will add that it's not, I've had clients who feel almost like they invalidate their feelings of trauma or their reaction because, well, I didn't have this happen, so I have no right to be feeling this way. What do you say about that?
I feel like any suffering is valid. I completely get it. We as humans, it's just the way that our brains work. So I don't judge what it is that's bothering or triggering somebody. If you're bothered or triggered, I don't care the severity level of it. That really, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And I know a lot of people really do just dismiss like those little things that have happened because other people are suffering from this and this and this. And it's it's still harming you, and it's still making you less effective to the people around you, and all of that. Like the same people who tend to dismiss their own suffering also tend to put everyone else around them first. And they have to realize that it's important to take care of themselves and their own emotions and their own triggers and their own internal world in order to be the best version of mother, wife, friend, whatever it is who they want to be taken care of. They have to be in a good, healthy place themselves, and they can't go around dismissing, oh, I'm supposed to be taking care of all these people. My stuff doesn't matter at all in comparison to what's going on with them. But you end up really messing with your health. I mean, not only your mental health, but your physical health. Um, and this isn't about victim blaming or anything, but a lot of times breast cancer, for instance, comes from a tendency to over nurture everybody around you and not get anything in return for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much research about that now. It's like, doctors, psychiatrists, metaphysicians, everybody's like doing their own research on this topic, and everyone's coming up with the same information. If you have these emotional patterns, these are the health issues you can expect as a result of these emotional patterns. So it's more likely that we inherit our ancestors' poor emotional coping mechanisms that lead to the health conditions that run in our families than it is to inherit the health condition that runs in the family. So we are messing with our health if we don't deal with whatever the emotional unrest is that shows up for us, whether it's worthy or not.
Well, I was going to say, like, you're in taking care of yourself, you are essentially taking care of those around you as well.
Right.
For those very reasons.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I love talking about this stuff, April. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you feel you want to leave the viewer with about your work or about anything at all?
Well, I mean, my top message always is that if you want true emotional long-term relief, you have to deal with the subconscious mind. And it doesn't really matter to me how you go about doing that. EFT, EMDR, hypnosis, NLP, PS Tech, like as long as you're dealing with the subconscious and you continue to stick with it, it will change everything, because you can walk around being as mindful as you want, but you're always going to have to talk yourself down. Like you will still always have the reaction. It could take 10 years of mindfulness on a particular topic before your subconscious finally realizes, like, oh, maybe that's not a threat and I don't need to react to that anymore. Or you could take like 20 minutes with PS Tech or, a few rounds of EFT in order to remove that as a trigger response. So, what do so it just gets so exhausting. I got so exhausted trying to be mindful all the time and talking myself down and trying to put a positive spin on everything and explaining things away and going, oh, well, of course my parents had to do this and this or said these things. Like they didn't know any better and this is how they were raised and whatever. And that's all wonderful. That's great to have as a conscious level. But if you've had trauma with family members in the past or difficult interactions, every time you think about them or interact with them, your walls go up. And so you can talk about forgiveness. You can, have all this compassion and understanding for the whys, but some part of you will still be reactive unless you deal with it on the subconscious level. and get the subconscious to that level. Because that's, to me, like what this work is all about. It's like your conscious work has gotten you up here with all of this great wisdom, but your subconscious is still down here going, no, we're afraid, we need to protect ourselves, we need to be safe. And so it's about getting the subconscious to that same level, so you're not at odds with yourself and constantly having to argue and talk yourself down and try to put a positive spin on things that you don't feel and hear positive about.
Yeah, I so agree with this. And the work I've done with clients has bared out that if your emotions live in your subconscious, your logic is conscious, and that's great, but your emotions always win out. That's what we react from first. So if the pattern in your subconscious mind is different than what you're telling yourself with mindfulness, you're always going to kick back to the emotional state. So that's what needs to be addressed.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, April, for everything today. It was wonderful to hear all your wisdom and your techniques. And I would love to get together and talk with you again. There's so many topics that we could really dig into.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of rabbit holes for us to explore. That would be great.
It's also interesting. So thank you again for being here. And thanks everyone for joining us. I will link all of April's information below so you can find out more about her techniques, and we'll see you soon.